My name is Terry Ray Crawford, and I retired as a Senior Chief Fire Control Technician, guns. Well, mainly I could see the writing on the wall as far as the draft was concerned and service in the Army, so I elected to join the Navy instead. So I guess you could say I'm a 20-year draft dodger. I was actually headed for the Air Force recruiting office. I was on my motorcycle and it started to rain. So I saw a Navy recruiting office and pulled in there to get out of the rain, and that's how it all started. It wasn't really planned. I enlisted in the Navy in Indianapolis, Indiana, and went to boot camp in Great Lakes, Illinois. I reported to Camp Moffett October of 1968. Well, just like any teenager, it was a growing experience. Learning to take care of myself instead of depending on someone to take care of me, and learning how to get up and get on the job in the morning and that sort of thing. So that's basically it, just learning to come from being a teenager with no discipline to being a military person with lots of discipline. Hard boot camp, it's a lot of drill, a lot of watch standing, a lot of learning how to take care of myself more than anything, I think. It was cold and windy, a lot of snow. Yeah, it was pretty miserable. And upon completion of boot camp, went home for 30 days leave and then reported aboard the USS Kepler, DD-765 at Boston Naval Shipyard at Pier 4 West. And upon completion of boot camp, went home for 30 days leave and then reported aboard the USS Kepler, DD-765 at Boston Naval Shipyard at Pier 4 West during an overhaul. Actually, when I first reported to Boston Naval Shipyard, the Kepler was in dry dock. It was painted a plethora of colors. It didn't look like a ship at all. Matter of fact, when I first saw it, the only thing that I could recognize was the banner that was stretched across the bow that said USS Kepler. Other than that, it didn't look like a ship. There was so many cables and wires hanging all over the place, and it was painted yellow and red and some gray spots here and there. It was in the middle of an overhaul, so it didn't look like a ship at all. I was on deck force. I started off on deck force as a bosun's mate, and my port side maintenance, chipping and rust and paint, and that's basically what I did. It was very crowded. I mean, the situation where the bunks were and so forth were very tight quarters. Wasn't too clean, you know. It was shipyard work, you know, lots of dust and dirt and that sort of thing. So during the shipyard period, I was asked, visited in the bosun locker by an Ensign Schnobel, who was requesting volunteers to strike for fire control. And I chose to stick my hand up, and that's how I became involved in fire control. And most of my time after that was spent in gun plot and the gun director. Well, fire control is mainly managing the operation of the 5" 38 gun mounts, the 37 system director, the Mark I able computer, the plotting room, stable element, all of the equipment involved in directing fire. How long? It's hard for me to remember how long that was. I was a young sailor and I was just trying to survive. I wasn't paying attention to the time and that sort of thing. We finished the overhaul and went out for sea trials in the North Atlantic. All I remember is it was stormy and rough and a lot of people getting sick and that sort of thing. After that was done, of course, we did our Caribbean cruise, which was pleasurable. It was nice. Jamaica was one of the favorite ports. And then St. Croix, Christiansted and Frederiksted. In particular, we were able to snorkel Buck Island, of all places. A beautiful place to snorkel. So we really didn't do refresher training in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Yeah, that was our main training exercises down there. That was to get the ship back into battle readiness after the overhaul. We usually had 3-section watch. You were on for 8 and then off for the remainder of that time. You'd have 8 hours on the equipment, 8 hours on military watch, which means standing watch for underway watches and so forth, and then some time off. We were involved also in one of the Apollo shoots. We were down in Cocoa Beach, Florida for one of the Apollo launches. We escorted some Polaris submarines on refresher training. The only time I recall being involved with any Soviet vessels were when we were escorted. This was on the Kepler before the Robinson. We were off Cocoa Beach escorting Polaris submarines for their refresher shoot. They were to shoot a Polaris missile on their missile range. Actually, it was pretty dull until the missile broke the surface of the water. On the missile range, it was very quiet. You couldn't tell anything was going on. You were just out there along with the observation island. That's the name of the tracking ship that was along with it. It was going to track the missile. And we're out there just floating around. All of a sudden, you'd see this big thing come whooshing up out of the water. That's all we knew about it. You know, we didn't know when it was going to happen. So one of our assignments was to keep the Russian fishing trawlers at bay so they couldn't film the operation. That was the only time I was ever aware that that was going on. Of course, we went through a refresher training in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba during that time. Anyway, then somewhere along the line we were supposed to be in Malta for that Christmas, and the ship was reassigned home ports to Pearl Harbor, Hawaii for duty in Vietnam. Anyway, then somewhere along the line we were supposed to be in Malta for that Christmas, and the ship was reassigned home ports to Pearl Harbor, Hawaii for duty in Vietnam. Went down through the Panama Canal and changed home ports to Pearl Harbor. I think it was our first Westpac cruise. We went straight to the Philippines, to Subic Bay. Then we did a gunline tour in Vietnam. Well, as far as I could tell, we were well within the 12-mile limit. We could actually see vegetation and the impacts and so forth, so we were relatively close. Again, I was a young sailor. I wasn't in charge of that, so I just did what I was told. Well, it changed from time to time. I started out as a stereoscopic rangefinder operator, but as long as the radar worked, I really didn't have an assignment. I was there in case the radar stopped working, that sort of thing. I served as a director pointer, rangefinder operator. On occasion, I would serve as a rangekeeper on the Mark I able computer. That sort of thing. And, usually fire missions were controlled by a spotter. Whatever rounds were fired, we would be given offsets to correct the fire. So it was hard for me to determine how accurate initial rounds would be. I know that whenever we had sled shoots for practice, it was pretty accurate, but still you would require someone to spot us on. The only time I ever had any indication of what the targets were is when I was operating I'm trying to remember what it was called. I was in CIC, and it was a grid spot converter. That's what it was. When we're converting grid coordinates from what we hear on the beach, the Marines would call it in and so forth, when they were trying to redirect fire. On occasion, you could hear descriptions of what, trucks in a convoy, what have you, but nothing really specific. I was fortunate enough to where we never received any enemy fire. Of course, I understand just prior to my joining the Kepler, it was actually hit. I'm sure one of the other interviews had some extensive information about that. Us personally, I don't recall us ever receiving any enemy fire. We did serve behind the, don't know if it was the Ranger, but we did some plane guard duty. I don't remember the names of the carriers. I know that later in my career, I know I was on plane guard detail in the battle group for the Ranger. I think we visited Hong Kong after that, and then was back on the gun line. Intermittent between that, rearming and restoring and at sea and so forth, and then back to Subic, and then back to Pearl. Well, it was a fairly tight-knit group, considering the ship was only so long and only 50 feet wide. I mean, you had to. The mess decks was probably the main point of concentration of people during the movie time. Back in those days, we didn't have DVDs or anything like it. It was all reel-to-reel films and so forth, so we'd all have to congregate in the mess decks, and everyone smoked, and it was, you could cut it with a knife. Actually, the only places we went were Westpac that I recall. I mean, it was, we were either at home or we were headed back and forth between Pearl and Subic and Hong Kong and the coast of Vietnam, the Gulf of Tonkin. When I re-enlisted, just before the Kepler was sold to the Turkish Navy, I believe I was in gun plot when a Turkish admiral came aboard to take a look, and I think my only assignment was to fire up the range keeper so it would make a noise, and he was very pleased that it made that noise. He had no idea what we were, what it did, but anyway, that's the extent of my involvement in the decommissioning. I don't remember anybody being upset about it or anything like that. It's business, you know. The ship was pretty old. It was time. I re-enlisted. I had made third-class petty officer without school as a striker, and just out of the book. Then when I re-enlisted and got my re-enlistment bonus, they sent me to BEE school in San Diego. Then I went to A school in Vallejo, California. Well, BEE school is just basic electricity and electronics, which I already had a pretty fair grasp on my own, but they still have to send you to that school to prep you for A school. FTA school, fire control theory, that sort of thing, some more electronics, radar electronics, mechanical, analog computer mechanics, that sort of thing. And then I was sent to C school in Great Lakes, Illinois. C school was mainly just to enhance on that. It was all basically the same thing, understanding the equipment and fire control problem itself. Once completing that school, I was sent to the USS Howell, DDG-13. Once completing that school, I was sent to the USS Howell, DDG-13. It was bigger, more comfortable. Things were quite a bit newer. Still had an analog computer, but it was in a much easier to maintain configuration. The radar was about the same. It was just a newer ship, a little more room to stretch out. Like I said, I was on the Howell first, but I was transferred off of the Howell because of I had one of my children came down with viral meningitis, and so when they flew me off of, or transferred me over to a carrier and flew me home. And then I was reassigned to the USS Robinson after that child was out of the hospital. So I was only on the Howell for like 6 months. I was on the Robinson almost 5 years after that. And that's where I made chief and senior chief and moved through the ranks. I was on the Robinson almost 5 years. And that's where I made chief and senior chief. Well, continued in the Mark 68 system and the 53 Alpha radar and the 47 analog computer. Basically, it was the same, except for the 5-inch, instead of 5-inch 38s, so 5-inch 54 guns, single barrel guns. It transitioned quite a bit. I mean, when I first got aboard the Robinson, I was a second class petty officer. I think I was a radio operator to start with. Of course, as I transitioned into chief, I became the plotting room officer. And my main assignment was the gun plot room. Of course, it was after the war, so most of our cruises were in the South Pacific. You call them the West Pac, but we didn't go to Vietnam, obviously. We were cruising through the Fijian chain and that sort of thing. Visited Australia and New Zealand. It was a nice cruise. While we were in the South China Sea, though, some interesting things happened. We came across, we were operating with the Thai Navy at the time. And as we were steaming past this junk, we spotted these pirates. It's interesting enough. We're robbing these Vietnamese boat people. And we requested permission to intervene. The Thai commander did not release us. We steamed over the horizon, and then after the ship was released from that command, we turned around, came back, and chased these pirates off. There's a website for the USS Robinson that has a whole video depiction of this operation, and there was approximately 250 people on this boat, and we recovered the majority of them. Some of them didn't make it. Some of them were lower renal shutdown from drinking seawater and that sort of thing, but that was quite an operation. So we rescued these people, had them on our O1 level aft, washing babies, hosing down people, giving them clothes, feeding them and so forth, and took them back to Subic. I was part of the crew that was involved with helping them, yes. They had a select number of members to keep the refugees and the main body of the crew separate in case there was some disease or whatever. There was a select group of us that took care of these people, and I was part of that group. And basically that was it. We just provided for them while we were transporting them back to Subic, to make sure that they were fed and clean and had clothes and that sort of thing. This occurred again with another boat, a much smaller boat, but we were involved, probably the most exciting thing that we did on the Robinson. Other than that, it was just drill and practice. And after I was finished on the Robinson, in between the Hoel and the Robinson, I worked at DOTC FMAG PAC at 32nd Street Naval Station, a maintenance facility. After the Robinson, I went to work at Fleet Trade Group, which is the refresher training shipwriters as a chief then. So I would go out on board ships all over the West Coast and help them with their refresher training activities. I went from there to Naval Training Center, San Diego. I was a drop officer for the students that were not, regrettably not fulfilling their obligations in school. So I was the person they would come to see when I would tell them, well, you're going to sea now and you're not going to be able to finish school. So I was also assigned for a while at ComNav SurfPac as a 3M team leader, the Maintenance Material Management Program. We were part of the team that did the 3M inspections on board ship. Those are my shore duty activities. Okay, while I was at Fleet Trade Group, I had a hobby where I had a personal, the PCs were kind of a new thing. And I had a personal computer that I was using to schedule ref tray riders with, and it's not something that was common in the Navy at the time to use computers to do this. This kind of led to my becoming the data processing manager for Service School Command. Before I became the drop officer, I worked as the data processing manager for Service School Command and NTC. This is when the Zenith contract first came out with the XT and the, excuse me, and the AT computers. that was by chance just something, let's see. I had started trying to think about converting my current fire control skills to something I could use at the outside, you know. And I thought this was a good way to go. The first computer that I picked up was a kit computer that had an operating system called CPM. It wasn't even DOS. Now, of course, you got Windows and that sort of thing. Well, one day I was up, and they had some officers standing around this new computer, and I understood that it was a DOS-based computer. I tapped one of the ensigns on the shoulder and asked him if I could come in at night and borrow their computer to learn DOS. Well, there was a four-striper standing behind me that leaned over and said, "Senior Chief, are you interested in this stuff?" And I said, "Well, yeah, Captain, I am." He says, "Well, then you're the new ADP manager for Service School Command." That's how I got that job. And said there was a semi-trailer of computers and monitors out here. I need them all configured for Fleet Trade Group and distributed to Yokosuka and various other places. So this is how I got involved in that. And what I do today for North Idaho College is I'm an IT person. So that's how that all happened. The Navy didn't have any PC training to speak of. That all of the experience I had is what they were looking for, because I was doing this as a hobby at Fleet Trade Group. So they were looking for anybody who had any interest in it at all. Of course, now it's widespread in the military, but this is back when it all first started. There were really no PCs in the military at that time.